Hi there. In this video, we're going to talk about what needs to be cited. In other words, when is citation needed? To answer that, we need to consider what needs to be cited and what doesn't. Just before we start, I want to make a quick note. And that is that sometimes when people hear the words cite or citation, they think it's just about quoting. But that's not what we mean by citation. When we say citation, we mean the practice of providing indications of your sources to make them transparent and traceable. So not only is citation different from quotation, but citation is also needed for much more than just indicating quotations. So, what kind of information needs to be cited? We know already that quotations need to be cited. When you're using the exact words of your source, you put it in quotation marks and you include a citation. If you paraphrase or summarize a source, you also need to add a citation. In other words, even when you're not using the exact words of the source, you still need to add a citation for the source. The same is true if you generalize over several sources. You're still using the work of others, so you still need to show your reader what your sources are and give the reader the means to track down those sources for themselves. When else do we need to cite? Well, we also need to cite any time that we use special concepts, theories, or definitions that have been generated by other scholars. So, for example, let's say I'm writing an essay about universal basic income. I'll need to explain to my readers what universal basic income means. Now, I found a nice definition in a published article. A universal basic income is usually conceived of as a fixed transfer given to everyone regardless of income level. Okay, can I use this? Yes, but I need to cite it. Any facts or data obtained by someone else also need to be cited. So this means reports, data sets, tables, figures, maps. If you didn't collect the data yourself or create the table or the map yourself, then it's someone else's work and that needs to be cited. Notice this sentence from the article that I just cited. Mexico's conditional cash transfer program reaches 32 million individuals. So here, the authors are presenting some data on how many people are reached by an economic program. And the authors have cited where they got this data from, which appears to be a report by the World Bank. We also need to cite any line of reasoning, argument, claim, or interpretation that another person came up with. For example, let's say that I'm reading an article and I find a really good argument in favor of universal basic income. Well, I can adopt that in my essay, but I have to show that it came from someone else. It wasn't my own work. For example, in the same article, I found a line of argumentation in favor of universal basic income that I would like to use. A universal basic income scheme does not require assessment of existing income. This means that it offers better support in countries where many people earn money in informal, unregistered jobs. So again, even though I'm not quoting the article, this line of argumentation is still an idea that I took from a source, so it needs to be cited. So, as you can see, a lot of things that you'll include in your writing need to be cited. In fact, by now you may be wondering what doesn't need to be cited. Well, if something can be considered general knowledge, you don't need to cite it. However, this then raises another question. What can be considered general knowledge? This is not always easy to decide, and it also depends on who your readers are. But we can start with a general rule of thumb. General knowledge is simple facts that are undisputed, and these are usually well-known facts that are fairly easy to look up or check. If someone else discovered, developed, interpreted, or analyzed it, then it's the work of somebody else, so it needs to be cited. This is especially the case when you're dealing with a topic that scholars are still studying or debating. Let's look at some examples. What about the name of a person or a place? Well, that's usually a simple fact that everyone agrees on. It's also not the result of analysis or interpretation by another scholar. So, names of people and locations are good examples of information that normally doesn't need to be cited. What about dates? Do dates need to be cited? Well, let's think about it. For many historical events, the date when it occurred is a simple fact that is well documented and which everyone agrees on. In that case, there's no need to cite. However, sometimes a date is debated or disputed, and then we need to acknowledge that debate. For example, take a well-documented, well-known event, such as the first time that humans landed on the moon. We can write that this took place in 1969 without needing a citation. However, take an event such as the founding of an ancient city or the date of birth of a historical figure. Often, our knowledge about such things is based on incomplete records or interpretations of historical sources, and even experts might not agree on the exact date. And when there is debate or interpretation involved, we need to cite. Now consider these two statements. The Americas are found to the east of Asia. The Americas were first settled 15,000 years ago. Both of these statements are based on evidence, geographical and historical. But the first one really stands out as something that is well known and undisputed, and therefore something that we would not need to cite. However, the second one, probably not many people know this, and it's plausible that new evidence could be found that would change our estimate of when humans first started to populate the American continent. So, with the second one, I would provide a citation so that my readers know where the information comes from and can go and take a look for themselves. I got this information from an academic article in a publication called Science, so I would cite this source in my essay. In practice, it takes experience to know what can be considered general knowledge, and it also depends on who you're writing for. Information that's considered general knowledge in one field might not be considered general knowledge in another field. As always, if you're not sure, ask a tutor or a researcher in your field. So, in this video, we've looked at what information needs to be cited. Most of the time in academic writing, we're building on information and ideas provided by other authors, and this means that most things you include in your essay will need to be cited. The only time that you don't need to cite is when something could be considered general knowledge. We've seen that it's not always easy to decide when something is general knowledge, and that it can differ depending on your intended readers. So here's a final tip about citing. If you're not sure whether to cite, and there's no one around you can ask, it's better to cite it. Citing when you actually don't need to does no harm. But not citing when you do need to cite can get you in trouble for plagiarism. So now you know when to cite sources, and we'll look at exactly how to cite sources in the next video. See you then.